We are the ministry of the real truth, and here is a heads up, something to be wary of. This is a video, a rather old video, that we found in the public domain, and here is the public domain mark for this particular video. Jesus was not a Jew. This is Pastor Eli James, of whom we have to be very wary of. He may have died a few years back, but at that time we have to be very aware of this guy and the organisation that he was affiliated to, and their many false claims of superiority, racial superiority, etc. We have found a website on Pastor Eli James and why this particular person investigated him. And he states, in his search for the truth, he had come to a point where he realised the Jews were behind, at the top and at the bottom of everything evil. This is this guy's personal opinion. He came across Pastor Eli James with another fellow named Pastor Greg Howard. He was amazed at their language and the bashing of Jews, and told a friend, if you think that this guy disliked the Jews, you should hear these two fellows, this writer in particular. His first impression of these two was, here's two Jews starting a new religion. He later told Eli about this, and of course, as he would later see the pattern, there was no reply. Of course, he later found that Eli was continuing to penetrate and promote Christian identity in order to mongrelize, Catholicize, universalize and destroy it. This is exactly what has been going on for years and is continuing to this very day. He had listened to all of his shows from Talk Show and remembered that he was always laughing at everything, including the miseries of other people. If he laughed about Jews' miseries, this particular writer or reviewer didn't care. This laughter at the wrong things made him shake his head, and often he would say to himself, what is this guy laughing at? That's not funny. There is something very wrong here. He also remembered that he predicted that the world would end on December 21st, 2012, which is what the Mayan calendar predicted. The Mayan calendar is an ancient calendar system that rose to fame in 2012 when a great cycle of its long count component came to an end, inspiring some to believe that the world would end at 11 universal time on December 21st, 2012. The media hype and hysteria that ensued was later termed the 2012 phenomenon. 12, 21 equals 33, 3 times 3 is 9. When the date passed, he tried to cover it all up, and this is all a matter of record. There's no denying this. The writer of this particular website, this blog, testified that he heard him say it on at least one of the talk shows. He had a countdown clock on his site at the time to count down to the end of the world. His prophecy. All you have to do is look this information up and you will see it for yourself. These are not rumours, these are facts. The author of this article didn't deal in rumours, he doesn't deal in with facts. He was willing to give the benefit of the doubt and allowed this mistake because no more prophecies were given by him that this writer knew of. His talk shows were not really teaching anything much and took an immense amount of shows to finish a single book. Greg would go on tangents that made the shows qualify as spoon feeding. Spoon feeder agent. Someone who dribbles out legitimate information. This is often done to build up a person's credentials, bona fides. Lots of the people who are pretending to expose the NWO Jews are spoon feeder agents who provide a little new information, tons of already known secrets, and sprinkle in a measure of disinformation for added fun. Generally, spoon feeders increase their percentage of disinformation once they gain respectability. There are very few people really exposing anything of consequence about the NWO. The writer noticed even back then that Eli James was not an original thinker. He always had to have a sidekick and documents that others have written to do his shows, and still does. Well, he may have passed. One of his personality traits that the author himself and others noticed was that he had a lack of caring about things. His work in every way was lackluster. There was an obvious pretense, and this is proven by his laughing at the wrong things. Everything that he says here can be proven by his own shows. On a somewhat recent VOCI show, Pastor Martins told Eli maybe quite a while back, his computer was being held by ransomware for $800. Eli laughed at that, and this writer shook his head and wondered if Pastor Martins realised the situation. This is just one of 1,000 examples of his lack of caring. He implied that he paid for everything to move him from Boston, and it was a lie. The writer from Boston, and it was a lie. The facts are he flew him to Boston, picked him up at the airport, paid for everything, and he meant, the author means everything, or the writer means everything, including him driving the rental truck back to Chicago and dropping off at U-Haul. He then paid the final bill. He paid for his plane ticket, but the writer reimbursed him for it. This implication is a form of lying, but not telling the whole truth. There are people who actually believe this deception. Eli came off like a typical Jew, always smiling and laughing. After all, who can say anything is wrong with a fellow like that? It's a technique, and a subtle one at that. The quintessential question he asked Eli was, why does everyone keep calling you a Jew? I mean, there must be a real reason, not the diversionary tactic Eli tried to use by saying, when people can't refute my doctrine, the last resort they have to have is to call me a Jew. He had been accused of copy-pasting his book, and after all, this writer had studied about this character. He believed it is highly likely. He believes it's highly likely. A fellow who has to have a sidekick and a set of documents written by others at all times speaks volumes to the writer, or this author. Back to previous days. After hearing the talk shows, the author tried to get in touch with Eli and was able to a few times. He didn't really want to speak on the phone for long, and a different name came up on the caller ID, which the author ignored, or the writer ignored, for he knew nothing of that name until later. He was told that he should speak with Paul, and he did. Before this time, he was told by friends and acquaintances that he should have a radio show, and he just shrugged it off and said maybe someday. The only thing he had done was to interview Eustace Mullins a few times, but not on radio. Paul asked him if he would like to do a radio show on FR, and he thought the father was wanting him to do this, and so did he, the writer. Here, he knew nothing about Christian identity, and he was still learning much about the Jews. He wasn't aware of the names-changing patterns of the Jews until EFR. He knew musicians and actors had stage names, but that was about the extent of it. It was assumed that this writer was a member of CI, Christian Identity, and he saw no harm in it until later when he found that Christian Identity was loaded with agents, mamzers, that's what they term children born out of incest, bastards, etc., and practicing liars. But in Hebrew it actually means child born of illegitimate, born of a Jew and a non-Jew, supposedly. Go do your research on that. That's just what we found. Yeah, we did have someone who was a semi-friend, but we weren't really that associated. It was just really a religious chat source, right? And he was an admitted Christian Identity fan because he was from, he's Dutch, I think. Yeah. And he was happy in his church there until all these Africans, non-Dutch Jews, etc., started infiltrating, and he got really upset. And he tried to get into America, or something like that, and he got into Christian Identity. He wanted to get into America and start a Christian Identity movement there against these American Negroes, Jews, Mexicans, etc. But he wasn't allowed in for some reason. This is what he said. And he told us about Mamses and all sorts of stuff, saying that they're all different races, apart from his superior white race and all this sort of stuff. Sometimes he was friendly and agreeable, and other times he was just plain out nasty, calling us the N-word and all this sort of stuff. Not saying everyone, just stating what he found to be true. This is the writer. Agents were often brought in by Eli James, who the author believed is a Mamzer Jew, an agent provocateur after Yahweh revealed, and is continually revealing to him and many of their brethren. Well, we remember this person we sort of defended, a religious chat source, and I think he might quoted something about a certain guy that says, "Oh, Mamses, they're bastards," or whatever. And we checked this guy out, and it's because that's what he said. Okay? He said that that's what it meant when it actually doesn't mean that in the Hebrew, according to the scriptures, etc. Whatever. Right? Yeah. Make no mistake. Almost everyone who has come in contact with Eli James has called him a Jew, and has separated from him, including Mamses. He has brought into CI or Christian identity. They are now and have in the past been in the chat rooms, guys, the CI elders. Some of the names are Captain Witness, also known as Commander McBragg, and Stephen J. Elder in the past. In the present, the writer also believes is Mr. Kim Smith. Not positive, but no white man calls himself Kim. Asians do. Yeah, especially Koreans. They usually Il Ji Chong Kim or something like that, right? Okay, there's a picture there of them. Should blot it out. Pastor, this year is a self-confessed Mamzer provided by the Brethren. United Church of Yahweh fell apart late 2008 after this created so much distrust and discord that Pastor John Williams couldn't hold it together anymore and simply quit in disgust. The fact that Laszlo Patterson had been embezzling ministry funds for non-church enterprises didn't help. Darren Howard took over and ran UCOY for a few more weeks, assisted by Visser, who himself suddenly vanished without trace at early to mid-2009, along with his website and forums. They all just shut down and disappeared. Word finally reached the author and others via an announcement from Visser that he was permanently quitting CI. Darren Howard finally shut down UCOY and started his own ministry, The Remnant Way, in 2009. What actually happened was this. Visser had been laid off from Caterpillar, and as domestic tension mounted, his wife Bridget had left him. So maybe he was working for the bulldozer company or something, we're not too sure. Taking their children and gone back to live with their family in Washington State. His mother-in-law, who apparently despises him, had taken out an injunction against him to stay away from her home and family, which he almost immediately broke. He was subsequently arrested and spent around 3 weeks in custody on stalking charges. One of his wife's family's chief objections to him was that he was promoting racism and violence. In order to refute the claims, he got his brother Aaron Visser to delete his forums and website content and to present testimony to the court, including family photographs, to prove that he was not in fact white and so could not possibly be a racist Nazi. During a hearing in 2010, and while standing under the authority of the judge, Visser admitted that he was not white but was in fact Cherokee. So the claims of his wife's family had to be false. Supported by the fact that all his online presence, along with all incriminating evidence of his criminal conduct, such a forum post and website material going back several years, had been deleted. Later that year, he suddenly returned along with his CPM website and forum, albeit without any of the previous content. This fellow was associated with the Hal Turner network, and Eli brought him into EFR. Yes, another agent and a Mamzer. Major infiltration fail. And here's some information here. Probably a post on Facebook or something. Someone's reply. Visser had reopened Covenant People's Ministry in 2019 and claimed to be a CI pastor once again, right from a paper of Eli's 2010. One of Zog's favourite tactics against true Israel is to prop up failing pastors. They usually come out of the prison system. He has had much personal experience with the subversives among them, and as he related in his earlier article, posted on his website. And so there's more information. Eli brought William Fink and Pastor Stephen from the same type of situation. See William Fink's comment below. He says Eli never brought him into Christian identity. It's up to you to read between the lines, folks. This person wasn't attacking Fink, but he was just stating facts there. Here. Much of what Fink has said about Eli is absolutely true. He'd given Eli the free pass on this and not given Fink's work any attention and so forth. Okay. And we also found from the Anglo-Saxon Israel .org website information related to Eli James. Bit of humour. Okay, a bit of anti-Semitism there probably. Okay. There's one here somewhere where they seem to say that he looks like this particular guy here. A rabbi. He looked like this rabbi. They showed photos side by side. Okay, so we're going to listen to what this particular person, Eli James, had to say.
The Jews are actually the Canaanites, who were known as Edomites, across the river and up in the mountains of Mount Seir. And they didn't become, quote, Israelites until 125 BC, when the last real king of Judah and high priest defeated them in Idumea. Incredibly, unlike David in 1000 BC, he told them, be circumcised or die. So all those Jews decided to join the Israelite religion in 125 BC. They wrote none of the Bible. There was no such thing as a Jewish prophet, ever. Daniel was not a Jew. Jeremiah was not a Jew. Esther was not a Jew. All of these people were Israelites. And we Israelites were captured by the Assyrians in 745 BC and taken in captivity, and escaped there and went up to the Caucasus Mountains through the Pass of Israel and came out on the other side known as Caucasians. We went into the wilderness of Europe and founded the many nations for our father Abraham. And of course, hundreds of years later, after our captivity in Babylon, which the Jews had nothing to do with except to help the Babylonians capture us in 586 BC when they came and besieged Jerusalem. And so the Babylonians hauled us off to captivity, at least the last two tribes of Judah and Benjamin, to Babylon for 70 years of captivity as punishment for our sins. And it was at that time, when the Babylonians had surrounded the city of Jerusalem, that our prophet, not a Jewish prophet, our Israelite prophet Jeremiah, got some guys together and carted the Ark of the Covenant into his cave. Well, what Jeremiah didn't know was that his cave was directly under where the cross of Christ would go 500 years later. And that when the earthquake split the rock under the cross, Christ's blood would drip down and sprinkle the most holy, the Ark of the Covenant, the lid of the Ark of the Covenant. It was the atonement for us Israelites, because Yahweh only had a contract with us and nobody else. And that's why Jesus told his disciples to go only to the lost house of Israel. And he told them that that's why he talked in parables, because those Jews who had just recently joined the Israelite religion in 125 BC had no need to know any of this. And so he made it somewhat obscure when he said things. And this is why he told his disciples that he had only come for the lost house of Israel. And if you'll read the beginning of the book of James, you'll see that he addresses his book only to the house of Israel scattered abroad.
Okay, so is this true to fact, or is he just twisting the scriptures? We'll go back, have a listen again, and make additional content where needed.
Incredibly, unlike David in 1000, the Jews are actually the Canaanites.
Okay, so who's saying here the Jews are actually the Canaanites, whereas the original ancient, very old Brita, in the language of the Lishan Attica Cypraea, which is the original, ancient, very old language of God, that which he spoke to Adam and Eve in the garden supposedly, and the men at the Tower of Babel spoke. So Abraham being a Chaldean from the era of Chaldea, and then Apashkad having a son Eber, Apashkad being the father of the Hebrews, or the Awer in the Aramaic, who made a journey, who made a passage. They crossed over from that particular land. They migrated to Canaan, and they resided there because it was the promised land by God to Abraham at the time, or Abraham, and his family and his people. So these Awer, these Hebrew, and these Chaldeans merged as one group and crossed over to Canaan, which was full of the Hittites, and other ones, probably monitored by the Egyptians, the ancient Kemites, and so forth, or the ancient Egyptians. Okay, so, because at some point they went there and they invaded that area, and they patrolled it. They were basically in charge of it, masters of it. So if you have a look in the original Brita, the Aramaic, or Jesus in English, when these people made this journey, they crossed over to that area. There were other people occupying it. Yeah, sure, occupying it. Sure, they would have been their cousins, etc. They would have been related if the lineage, as we saw, goes back from Adam and Eve to the different peoples that after Noah had come out of the ark with his 3 sons and their 3 wives who were pregnant, well, they eventually had children, sons and daughters, descendants, right? And they spread out all over that land. Okay? Then these different people became different peoples according to the Brita, or the Genesis lineage shown there. So from Japheth came his descendants, and then their descendants and their descendants. From Ham came his descendants, and then their descendants, the descendants of sons and daughters, and their descendants carried on like that. And then you have the other son, where he had descendants, he had children, he had daughters, sons and daughters, and then they had children, sons and daughters, and then carried on. So in the lineage it tells you, okay, these were the descendants of who became the Greeks, the Medes, the Hittites, the Arameans, the Judeans, etc., etc. So if you have a look at that lineage, you'll find that there was Judeans. Somewhere along the way there was this tribe of Judah, so out of them came the Judeans. So this guy can't say that there was no Jews. They probably weren't given that name until, say, the middle ages or something like that, right? So they ran with it. Originally they were probably the Yehudai or Edai or something like that, had a different name. They became known as Jews. Yeah. Germans use the word Juden, which is very close to Jews, right? The pronunciation, etc., is very close to Jew, or Judea, and that's why they called them Jews. So it's quite well known up to that period, indicated by them calling them Jews. Die Juden, das Juden. So you can't deny that there was any Jews. Ezra, was it Ezra or Esther? Esther was actually a Jew. She was in Persia, and Haman really hated them and was probably responsible for them being persecuted, or he persecuted them alone until he was probably killed or something like that. And her uncle told her, don't tell Ahasuerus, whatever his Persian name was, who supposedly was Xerxes, that you're Jewish. Okay? So he fell in love with her, and she fell in love with him apparently, and got married, right? That's the supposed story. So she was a Jew. She was a Jewess. Yeah. They had that Jewish, if they came from the tribe of Judea, they had that affiliation. Who came first, the Judeans or the Israelites? If the Israelites came first, then there was the Judeans. If the Judeans came first, then there was the house of Israel, the Israelites. So looking at it, those lineages, it looks like there was the Hebrews, right, and the Chaldeans, from Ur of Chaldea, Abraham's family, etc. And then there's also the Hebrews, okay, the descendants of Arpachshad, probably the descendants of Eva, who was his son, but Arpachshad was known as the father of the Hebrews. So let's say the Hebrews, let's say the Chaldeans, then the Hebrews, and then later on with Jacob and his descendants comes the house of the Israelites. Okay, so it wasn't until Jacob was renamed by God Israel, and he'd be the father of these people, the Israelites. Okay, so they came. That's the order that they came in, according to Scripture. So this particular guy, Eli James, being of the Christian identity movement, is twisting everything and saying, "Oh, we were the Israelites. Those Israelites, these Jews, etc., they were not Israelites. This person, that person, whatever in the Bible was not a Jew, okay, etc., etc. We went to the Caucasus Mountains or came past Israel and went into the Caucasus Mountains, and we emerged when we came down from the mountains, the Caucasus Mountains, right, and saw these other people, etc., etc." That's what he's saying there. So let's have a listen to that to verify exactly what he said.
Who were known as Edomites across the river and up in the mountains. The Jews are actually the Canaanites, who were known as Edomites across the river and up in the mountains of Mount Seir. And they didn't become, quote, Israelites until 125 BC, when the last real king of Judah and high priest defeated them in Idumea. Incredibly, unlike David in 1000 BC, he told them, "Be circumcised or die." So all those Jews decided to join the Israelite religion in 125 BC. They wrote none of the Bible. There was no such thing as a Jewish prophet, ever. Daniel was not a Jew. Jeremiah was not a Jew. Esther was not a Jew. All of these people were Israelites. And we Israelites were captured by the Assyrians in 745 BC and taken in captivity, and escaped there and went up to the Caucasus Mountains through the Pass of Israel and came out on the other side known as Caucasians. We went into the wilderness of Europe and founded the many nations for our father Abraham. And of course, hundreds of years later, after our captivity in Babylon, which the Jews had nothing to do with except to help the Babylonians capture us in 586 BC when they came and besieged Jerusalem. And so the Babylonians hauled us off to captivity, at least the last two tribes of Judah and Benjamin, to Babylon for 70 years of captivity as punishment for our sins. And it was at that time, when the Babylonians had surrounded the city of Jerusalem, that our prophet, not a Jewish prophet, our Israelite prophet Jeremiah, got some guys together and carted the Ark of the Covenant into his cave. Well, what Jeremiah didn't know was that his cave was directly under where the cross of Christ would go 500 years later. And that when the earthquake split the rock under the cross, Christ's blood would drip down and sprinkle the most holy, the Ark of the Covenant, the lid of the Ark of the Covenant. it was the atonement for us Israelites, because Yahweh only had a contract with us and nobody else. And that's why Jesus told his disciples to go only to the lost house of Israel. And he told them that that's why he talked in parables, because those Jews who had just recently joined the Israelite religion in 125 BC had no need to know any of this. And so he made it somewhat obscure when he said things. And this is why he told his disciples that he had only come for the lost house of Israel. And if you'll read the beginning of the book of James, you'll see that he addresses his book only to the house of Israel scattered abroad. And graphics that will help you understand that we Anglo-Saxons are the real Israelites, and the Jewish people are the Edomites, who were forced to join the Israelite religion when John at Cranus II defeated them in Idumea. And of course, Idumea is just Greek for Edom. If you look on your Bible maps, you'll see that Edom was there quite a while back in the time of David, and you can read about how David went over and slaughtered Edomites for 6 months in 1 Kings chapter 11. And that was when God sent David to kill off the Jews. But Hadad, the prince of Edom, got away and fled to Egypt, where he grew up and married an Egyptian wife and came back to Edom later, which is how the Edomites wound up helping the Assyrians capture us, and then helping the Babylonians capture us in 586 BC. And as you'll see as you study the Bible and look at these interesting charts, the Jews don't even own Hanukkah or Passover. In John 8:33, the Jews tell Jesus that they've never been in bondage by any man. You can look up that verse and see for yourself that they admit they've never been in bondage. Well, if they were never in bondage, that means they certainly weren't in Egypt as slaves, and they weren't in Babylon as slaves. So the bell begins to ring when you realize that these people are the world's greatest liars and impersonators.
Okay, so we've heard what he said, that the Jews aren't Israelites, etc., etc., but you have scripture which states that the Israelites were to be, they were the chosen, right? The chosen nation of God. They're supposed to be holy, righteous, etc. An example to the non-Jews, the Goyim, the pagans, the heathens, who would eventually come to know about the one true God and be eligible for salvation, grace, mercy, God's love, etc., and into the kingdom of heaven after death, after judgment, after death, whatever, however it is, right? So these Israelites kept mucking around and going to other nations and then embracing their pagan religions, their rites, etc., or their practices, etc. So God forewarned them with prophets, and a lot of times they killed them, right? So he sent another one, killed them, and it just kept happening because they didn't want the authority, they didn't want to be ruled, they rebelled, they turned their back on their God. So he said, right, because you've turned your back on me and you're unrighteous, you're wicked, you're evil, etc., I'm going to get someone to come down and boot you right up the bottom, right? They're going to take you captive and take you to their land, and you're going to be under my curse, etc., etc. So this happened with the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and then they were rescued by the Persians, and they were free to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple, which was destroyed. That's what the scriptures say. So I don't know what this guy's doing. He's twisting it around to promote this Christian identity, white supremacy concept. Okay, supposedly this guy secretly, because of his name, etc., they found out that he was a Jew. Maybe William Fink was as well. Not really sure on that one. But this guy was exposed as being Jewish, hence his name, right? So whatever happened after that there's history, CI history, right? You have to go deeper into the research and find that out. Yeah, but so like this guy's twisting everything. Or either that, your modern Americanized, your modern Americanized, modern English Bible versions are actually corruptions. Okay, and someone's revised it and totally twisted everything, and it's a total lie, total sham. That these Jews aren't actually Israelites or this sort of stuff like this. Eli James apparently, or this guy here is saying, part of CI movement, right? And this guy's, the one with the truth. He's telling the truth. Okay, we'd have to look at the original, ancient, very old Tab Asher, the ancient Aramaic, Lishana Articus the Prayer, the scribal language of God. What these original Old Testament manuscripts actually say in the nearest English equivalent. These are hand copied by scribes and monks in Urhay or Edessa, now modern Turkey, around 800 BCE, to see what it actually says. Okay, and then we can verify if this guy's lying through his teeth, or those scriptures are complete bogus, phony lies, and this guy's got the truth. Okay. So we may do that with a part 2. We're going to leave this here, let you ponder this. Watch this video. We'll leave the link to this video and to the 2 websites that the people were mentioning about this guy Eli James, or this guy who read us. But I think it's Eli James related. I'm not too sure who exactly this guy is, right? But we've got a feeling it's either somebody called Black, I don't know what his name was, David Black or something like that, or he's actually Eli James. Okay, so if you like this that we've brought to you, something to be wary of this guy, and also the Christian identity movement, which is very race superior oriented. Okay, calling others mamsers, bastards, mongrels. That was the other word that this guy used on the social chat site, religious social chat room, that we're all mongrels. If we're half-breeds, the beasts of the field in Genesis were these Africans or non-whites and all this sort of crap, right? Well, it doesn't say that at all. Oh, it says it in the Hebrew. Does it? Let's ask a Hebrew speaker. Does it say in the Aramaic? Let's ask an Aramaic speaker. Right? A Syrian speaker, etc. Someone who's very, very knowledgeable in the ancient, original, very old manuscripts, not these modern derivatives or these modern vernaculars, okay? Because no one can speak those original languages, because they're no longer used, they're no longer spoken or written.